Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're listening from in the world. My name is Jacqueline Dixon, and you're tuned in to the Ordinary People Show. Ordinary people can do extraordinary things. And we're broadcasting live on GBKM FM TV network from Toronto, Canada. I'm extremely excited to be in studio this week. Why? Because I missed you guys dearly last week. For my avid listeners and followers, you know that I was not in studio last week because I had to play it safe. Had to make sure that I was well. I was feeling just a little bit off. And what do you do when you feel off? Ladies and gentlemen, you stay home. Stay home and make sure that it's just either a passing thing or you get whatever necessary treatment that you might need to get for whatever ailment might be taking over your body. And I just want to make sure that I'm always doing the right thing when it comes to health matters, especially in a very delicate time like this. As you know, we're all experiencing a pandemic and we're all experiencing it together. And we all need to do our part in a very serious way to ensure that we help to reduce the spread of COVID-19 and any other variants that might be spreading around our community. So do your part. Ladies and gentlemen, again, thank you so much for tuning into the Ordinary People Show today. I've got an exciting show for you. Listen, I might have been away physically away, but spiritually I'm never away from my listeners and viewers, and never really away from the GBKM studio and the news that we always aspire to share with you on a daily and weekly basis. GBKM FM is proud to let you know that we have launched or expanded our network, of course. We have a brand new website that I'm so excited about. For those of you who are listening to us on our web radio, which is www.gbkm.fm, hello to you. For those of us who are following us on our Facebook, which is Great Benin Kingdom, thank you so much for watching and tuning in today. And for those of you who've made it over to our brand new platform, which is gbkm.tv, 24-hour live television and radio, servicing all of your needs for music and also pumping out the best in R&B, soca, reggae, calypso, Afro beats, and so much more. When we're not filling the airways with those beautiful melodies, we have a number of live programs that you can enjoy throughout the course of the week. So check it out. Check out our new website when you get there. Don't forget to download the app and tell a friend to tell a friend as we grow and spread the message of GBKM TV network throughout the world. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank our sponsor for giving us the opportunity to be on air today, which is New Era Communications. New Era Communications is a professional speaking and sales training platform dedicated to the training of up-and-coming entrepreneurs and sales professionals. Are you looking to increase the revenues for your business? Are you an entrepreneur that's struggling with the sales process? Don't hesitate to contact neweracommunications.ca and find out how you can increase your knowledge on the sales process so that you can start enjoying that gift that keeps on giving. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, for those of you who follow me on social media, we've got a fantastic show in store for you. It's all about hate. Yeah, the rise of hate, or preferably, or in my opinion, the fall of it is what I would hope. But we're going to be talking today about the rise of hate crimes and hate-related groups in Canada. I know that we've been paying close attention to our cousins south of the border, but it's now time to start paying attention to what's happening in our own backyards. And I've got two gentlemen that are waiting in the wings right now from Anti-Group, the website antigroup.ca, but the organization is the Canadian Anti-Hate Network. And these two gentlemen are waiting to come on right after our first commercial break. We're going to be dissecting this step by step, ladies and gentlemen, so we can understand exactly what is happening on our own shores and how we as a community can get involved to provide some solutions. I'm so looking forward to this interview. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this quick commercial break.
GBKM TV, the station with a vision. GBKM TV, the station with a difference now. Slim Flex said so. Big up Ghana, up. GBKM TV, the station with a vision. GBKM TV, the station with a difference now. Slim Flex said so. Big up.
Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Ordinary People Show. I'm your host, Jacqueline Dixon, here each and every Saturday from 12:30 to 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Let's get into it, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get into the topic of discussion today, which is, mind-blowing. Remember, what we're here to do on the Ordinary People Show is to educate, inspire, and empower. Today is all about education today, okay? And I want you to sit back and I want you to have an open mind. And I want you to tell a friend, like and share the video. If you're watching it live or if you're watching it on demand, do the same, like and share it, because your life, I'm sure, will never be the same after today's message. Ladies and gentlemen, let's take the time to introduce my two guests that we have. And my two guests that are coming to us virtually today are from the Canadian Anti-Hate Network. And I first want to introduce, of course, Mr. Bernie Farber. Mr. Bernie Farber. Hello, good afternoon, Bernie. How are you?
I'm fine, Jacqueline. How are you doing? Thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you so much. And you are a board member, of course, with the Canadian Anti-Hate Network. But you actually, I think you're chairman of the board. Am I correct, Bernie?
I am the chair of the board, but don't tell the late Frank Sinatra.
Awesome. Good stuff. And before I introduce my next guest, which is your associate, Bernie, can you tell us a little bit about your background as far as your responsibilities to the antigroup.ca are concerned,
Sure.
and how you came about to fill the role of chairman of the board?
Absolutely. I have been working in the area of race relations and human rights for more than 3 decades. I started off here in Toronto with the Canadian Jewish Congress back in 1984 and became eventually their chief executive officer, and was in that realm that I work with racialized communities, ethnic communities, minority communities, in terms of identifying civil rights issues, human rights issues, and most importantly, hate mongers that were out there that were targeting our communities. We always felt that we would be much safer in numbers, much safer as communities coming together to deal with these issues. And we had some good successes back in the 80s and 90s and the early 2000s. I left the Canadian Jewish Congress in 2011 and took the helm of the Paloma Foundation that worked with Indigenous people and homeless youth. I stayed there for a few years and went from there to the Mosaic Institute, which is an organization that brings together communities, different communities that have been at loggerheads with each other. And we used to provide a platform, if you will, a place for them to meet and to have civil discussions where they can work issues out. I retired, actually, that's what they tell me, about 3 years ago. I call it rewired with Jacqueline as opposed to retired. And what we discovered was as hate was rising, as white supremacy was on the rise, as neo-Nazism was on the rise, we actually did not have an organization to monitor and to act, as, if you will, as a fence of protection for racialized communities out there and ethnic groups that find themselves the target of these bullies and these bigots. And so, along with a couple of individuals, we established what became the Canadian Anti-Hate Network. Evan Balgord is our executive director. Richard Warman sits on the board with us, as does Nigel, Sue Gardner, Kurt Phillips, who is out west, And we I think I mentioned Richard Warman, who is helps us understand the legal implications of what we're doing, and we have a vast advisory board of men and women who have been steeped in understanding and dealing with race relations and hatred. People like Dr. Karen Mock, Dr. Barbara Perry used to be on our board, Olivia Chow, Phil Fontaine, the former Grand Chief, and many, many more. And so we have now become boots on the ground, if you will. We are the organization that confronts hatred, that exposes hate, and we do the best that we are able to protect vulnerable communities out there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that in-depth analogy of what you've been doing for the last, 30 years, 40 years even. That's
30
fantastic.
years.
To know that we've had an individual like you in our community that has been so deeply involved in wanting to make a difference in a very touchy, sensitive area such as race relations. You know, most people do try to shy away from it because it's one of those taboo subjects that nobody kind of really wants to get their hands dirty in. But kudos to you for taking on this challenge head on.
Thank you.
Now, you're also here today with your associate, which is Mr. Nigel Barif. And I want to introduce Nigel to my Ordinary People listeners and viewers. Good afternoon, Nigel. How are you?
Good afternoon, Jacqueline. Thank you so much. Greetings. Thank you so much for having me here with you today.
Awesome. Listen, unlike the chairman of the board, I'm going to read your bio because you come from a very interesting background as well, and I think that you bring a lot of value to not just this organization based on your background, based on your educational background and your employment history as well, but of course you are you're clearly an individual who would be a visible minority that has probably most likely experienced racism head on. So just to appreciate Nigel for a little bit of, to do with his background as I do, listen to his bio. A community organizer and an elementary teacher with the Toronto District School Board in Rexdale. Nigel is a board member of the Rexdale Community Legal Clinic, a board chair of the Urban Alliance on Race Relations, and a member of the Good Jobs for All Coalition. He was the interim treasurer of the Ontario Alliance of Black School Education and a former co-chair of the African Heritage Educators Network. Nigel's activist work focuses on quality public education, good green jobs, and more just society for all inside and outside of the classroom. His efforts have been recognized through a number of community service awards, including the 2011 Urban Heroes Award and the 2012 J.S. Woodwards Award and the 2014 Jack White Service Awards from the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists. He also holds a master's degree from the Ontario Institute of Studies in Education. Congratulations, Nigel. Wow. That is an impressive background. And I just want to say that we welcome you to the Ordinary People Show.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Now listen, I've got two gentlemen who bring a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of education, and a wealth of experience to this platform. And I don't even think 45 minutes is going to be enough for me, to be honest. But I'm going to try to get as much information. We're going to try to cover as much information as we possibly can in the time that we're going to spend together so that we can make a lasting impact on the lives of our viewers and listeners, whether they're watching live or on demand. So let's start off with the very simple question. What is the Canadian Anti-Hate Network? What is that network?
So the network, Jacqueline, is a group of individuals who have come together in order to expose and confront white supremacy, hatred, bigotry, and neo-Nazism. There are approximately now 4 full-time workers, a number of contract workers, a large advisory board. You can find out more about what we do on our website, antihate.ca. For the most part, we have been concentrating really on the very sad rise of organized hatred in Canada. That's obviously our focus. You had mentioned that I go back a long time. Yes, I go back 30 years. And I go back far enough to remember that when hate groups were trying to organize in Toronto, the best that they could do at that time was to stand on corners like Yonge and Bloor and hand out pamphlets. And if 5 people picked up those pamphlets, that was considered a good day. Their messages were, of course, hateful and disgusting, but they didn't have much of a vehicle with which to spread their nonsense. Today, we're in a whole different kettle of fish. Today, because of online media, social media, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, you name it, anyone with a bone to pick, anyone with hatred in their heart can simply go online, they can create a website, they can go on to places, websites that thousands and thousands of people access, and literally with the push of a key can send out hateful, disgusting information that attacks people of color, that attacks Jews and Muslims, LGBTQ plus people, and they've risen to proportions today that one wouldn't have dreamed possible before. So that's what brought the Canadian Anti-Hate Network into being. We work with all like-minded groups and communities, and we have become, thankfully, I think, a force for good in this country.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Now that I have a better and much more clear understanding of exactly the purpose of this group, I thank God for it. And the reason why I'm saying that is because, I've been in media for a minute now, and I've interviewed and I've had the distinct pleasure of interviewing some very high-profile individuals within our community and within our government. And I've interviewed current police chiefs. I've interviewed the head of the human rights on multiple occasions, but I've never interviewed or had an interview with an organization like yours. And this is the type of organization that the individuals that I have interviewed in the past, like the head of Human Rights Ontario, current police officers and police chiefs and so on and so forth, politicians, I have to assume that they rely on organizations like yours to keep them abreast of what is actually brewing in the grassroots community, what's happening on the ground. You used a term, Bernie, called boots on the ground, and I can really relate to that term because that tells me that you are a hands-on organization that is confronting these issues and these groups head-on. Now, in saying that, I want to bring to you, because I have a number of different questions and scenarios to bring to your attention in hopes of getting some concrete answers from your organization. In saying that, let's just set the stage a little bit for some of our viewers and listeners that are just tuning in. A week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, approximately, we saw something that 99% of us, I have to say, I'll go so far as saying 99% of us probably thought we would never see in our lifetimes. If somebody had asked us at any point during our life, do you ever see or could you ever contemplate a large group of hate-filled individuals storming the U.S. Capitol in the process of trying to overthrow the current government and carry out an insurrection? Could you ever see that happening? And I have to say that in me, along with I think 99% of the other people within my community, within my circle, within my network would probably come back and say, absolutely not. Are you insane? But it happened. It happened. And that opened my eyes to a lot. And that is why, and we've come to this point today, and hence why this interview is taking place, because my eyes have now opened up, and I don't believe they'll ever shut again to the fact that we have a problem on our hands that is growing exponentially, and it is not just growing on the southern shores, it is growing right here in our backyard, and it's called hate crimes and hate groups. Can you tell us, in your professional opinion, based on the knowledge and the information that you've gained since forming this organization, has there been a real and significant rise in the number of hate crimes and hate groups within Canada? I'll pose that question to you, Nigel, and then I'm sure Bernie will follow up with that. Has there been a rise, and if so, what is it?
Well, I mean, there's much research that has already, and data collection that's demonstrated that there has been a significant increase in anti-Semitic, anti-Black, anti-Muslim, LGBTQ violence. Bernie's already mentioned that, and again, I've from my own observation, and I think from what we've heard from staff, is that this isn't just brand new. It has been happening. We have heard, I have just today, one of another one of our board members was speaking publicly about he's been doing this work for a decade, and Bernie, they've all been doing this work for a decade, but it's been happening. And even leading up to 2 weeks ago, that event, what was going to be happening, we saw that in all of the channels that we follow. Like we're hunting these people. We need to stop it and expose it and put pressure on the police to lay charges, especially to the most egregious. And so I think it's no accident that when the 45th, the previous president, came to power, that Trumpism gave permission for these folks to now come from within underneath rocks and feel proud about what they've been doing. And so that's why I think conversations like this to speak with community about what is happening is so important for me. While of course I come to the work as a school teacher, seeing systemic racism, how its impact within the educational system, I know that we have to have an intersectional approach. I think Martin Luther King, he says that an injury to one is an injury to all. So it means that as a Black educator, I'm standing shoulder to shoulder with our Jewish community members. I'm standing shoulder to shoulder with our Muslim members, my LGBTQ community members, in fighting these are Nazis. These are white supremacists. These are people that want to perpetuate violence. Let's not forget that we did have six Muslim men that went to worship at their place of worship that were shot in their back. We've now seen a Canadian paramilitary person that tried to crash through the gates on Parliament Hill. We saw Alex Semessian down, that killed 10 of our citizens here in the city of Toronto. This is real violence that we must take serious and that we must all actively work against and fighting against. But coming back to your original question, and I hope I know Bernie has some of the stats on it. There's been a significant rise in this kind of hate, despicable behavior, criminality here in our country.
Thank you so much. And Bernie, I'm sure that you can probably add to that very passionate explanation from Nigel. And I really, it hit home for me, Nigel, when you were speaking. It really became very crystal clear how serious this is for you. I could see that. I could hear it in your very passionate explanation. And it makes me more inquisitive as to what we can do and how we can act. You said something which was very profound a little while ago. You said, we hunt these people down. Bernie, what does he mean by we hunt these people down?
We are in the dark corners of the online internet chat rooms, places where, Jacqueline, you don't want to go.
So just let me just make sure the viewers and listeners understand. So what you're saying is your organization
Correct.
purposely
Yes.
delves into these dark rooms.
We look for them.
You look for them. Okay, go ahead.
Nigel is quite correct. We are able to go even where police aren't able to go. We see the chatter that is online. We know what it means. We interpret it. We assess it. We consider, what danger signs are out there. We work closely with police and other authorities as need be. Look, I should tell your listeners, I come from a place where hatred was the final ingredient in the destruction of an entire people. My late father, Max, I tell you his name so that his spirit is alive, because it's partially alive in me. It's one of the reasons that I do what I do. My late father, Max, was a survivor of the Holocaust. He lived in a small village in Poland. There were maybe 750 Jews that lived there before World War II. He was married. He had 2 children, 7 brothers and sisters, cousins, friends. And when Hitler came to power and invaded Poland, Hitler did what he did in all the European nations. He targeted the Jews for ultimate murder. Mass murder, genocide. And by the time the war ended, my father was the last and standing Jewish person from his small village. All the others, his wife, his 2 children, his 7 brothers and sisters, his friends, there was nobody else. So he made his way as a stateless person to Canada, where he was able to start a new life. But understand that I had no paternal grandparents. I had no paternal cousins. I had no paternal uncles or aunts. I grew up in the shadow of genocide. I grew up in the shadow of hatred. And so it became, I believe, incumbent upon me as a person who understood what hatred was, even though my skin is white, and Nigel and I've had talks about this all the time, that we can stand in each other's shoes. The pain that we feel is the same pain. It's different for Nigel because he can't rub his skin color off. But people know, when people know who the Jews are. And I can tell you, when I grew up, and I grew up in this relatively small town of Ottawa, where there were maybe 3,000 Jews altogether. I was one of only 1 or 2 Jewish children in my school. A day did not go by that I didn't get bullied because I was a Jew, that I didn't get picked on, that there wasn't an anti-Semitic act. So I know viscerally the feeling of what it is to be hated. And the job that I decided to do, and others like Nigel and the others that have joined us on our board, Amira El-Gawabi is a Canadian Muslim who is a wonderful activist. She sits on our board as well. We've chosen to do this. We've chosen to hunt out these people that hate, because hatred is what is the germ. It is the virus that destroys society. And so we do what we can to expose it. It sometimes puts us in a little bit of peril. I have to say, we receive death threats and all kinds of threats over the course of weeks. Happens all the time. But we stand our ground because that's who we are. And there's much work to be done, Jacqueline. We're just, sadly, we're a small group. We get funding from, thank God, organizations like BMO has been a major funder. The government of Canada has given us grants, and people have donated to us to keep our vision alive. But there is so much work to do, and we're just scratching the surface.
Thank you so much. And we're going to talk more about some of the accomplishments that your organization has been able to achieve, because I was on your website and I was totally enthralled with it. You guys have some wonderful accomplishments that you can boast that come from a direct result of your investigative research and exploring these areas that you would call, you know, the deep dark web, and finding these chapters or these little nucleuses of hate groups that are either formulated and thriving or trying to start up, and you expose their organizers, you expose that network, and you've been fortunate enough to shut down a few. We're going to talk about that before the show wraps up. But what is clearly evident is that, yes, hate crime and hate groups are on the rise here in Canada, and our government has finally recognized that. I want to bring this I just want to share this information with you and get your feedback on some of the attempts, or one of the attempts that we know that government has currently made. Whether or not it has resulted in any real tangible solutions, I don't know. Maybe you can speak to that. But it seems that in response to the Quebec City attack, the House of Commons Heritage Committee, they called for a national strategy against racism and hate crimes. And the report that they released last year offered 30 recommendations, including training for media pundits. Now that is really something. Politicians about how to portray certain religious groups and racial groups, and how our means of portraying them could actually contribute to the climate of hate. And they also called for a better enforcement of laws to prevent racist fake news, and more resources also for police to tackle hate crimes. So where I'm going is this. When I read that, I thought, oh my God, that includes me, even in the simplest way. The minute that you have a megaphone at your disposal, whether you are web radio, mainstream media, it doesn't matter. You have a megaphone, you have listeners, you have viewers, you have people that are going to take in the information that you are sharing, whether it is in a small number or a large number, and information starts to spread. We as media professionals have a responsibility to portray racism in its correct fashion, and to call it out when we see it, and how we relate and share race-related information is critical to the viewer's thought process on how to act when it comes to racist issues or hate-related crimes. And that's a big responsibility that we have in the media. But they're also saying that politicians bear that burden as well. And clearly what we saw on the 6th of January was the culmination of politicians going unchecked for too long in their spreading of fake news and misinformation. And as a result of that, we had thousands of people that were led astray. What do you have to say in regards to that, and the recommendations again from the Canadian government relating to the rise of hate crimes?
I think one of the things that, in my opinion, that January 6th demonstrated in Capitol was that we're now at the point where we're the gullible and the dangerous are being brought together because of the internet. And this is what it makes it so important for us in our response and the work that that we're doing, and a lot of the success that Bernie's going to share with you, and we both can kind of share some of the success that we've done. I think in regards, one of the things I do want to tease out for the listeners, because I know that there was some conversation last week, both by the official opposition and also by the government, by the Liberal government, have talked about for instance, declaring the Proud Boys, which the U.S. version of them was identified as the major organizer of that insurrection, of that coup attempt that happened. But here in Canada, there are distinctions between the groups, and our research has demonstrated that. And so, I think that after lots of conversation within our board, we definitely feel that this call to designate, for instance, the Proud Boys a terrorist group, we think needs more conversation. We can't just do a knee-jerk reaction. And I say that to you, as an activist who, I've in my fights against police brutality, I have observed how those types of laws have been used, as opposed to being used against white supremacists. They end up being used against Black people, Indigenous people just trying to protect their lands, right? They're used against many of us from people of color. So I'm very I think that there needs to be major caution around that. It's not that we're not going to continue to fight Proud Boys here in Canada. That's not what I'm saying. But I think does that word terrorism has already been used in such a way that disparages our Muslim community, disparages Black communities. Even going back to the Panthers, right? It's been used to disparage us. I think calling out systemic white supremacy is exactly what we should be calling. Enforcing the laws that are on the books right now. That's kind of the key, I think, getting law enforcement to actually lay charges to the most egregious crimes is where we should be, another area we should be focusing on. I'm not sure, Bernie, what do you think?
Yeah, Jacqueline, for your listeners to understand, we need a bevy of tools in our tool chest in order to fight hate. It's kind of a bit of a double-edged sword sometimes. We have to work with police, even though we know that sometimes within police services, there might be those that carry even white supremacist ideas. We know that we have seen it, for example, in the Canadian military, where by their own admission, they had 30 or more white supremacists within the military. And it's only been because of the work that we have done, where we've exposed that and pushed them to the edge, where they have finally taken action, and good on them for doing this, where they have now provided orders and regulations to get rid of hate mongers within the military. That's words. Now words have to translate to action. Another thing that we've missed, maybe 20 years ago or so, the police used to have what were called anti-hate units. These were dedicated units, like a homicide unit, for example, whose sole purpose it was to investigate hate and to bring charges. And it was that way much better understood by the police, much better controlled by the police, and they were able to take away because they had to work with affected communities. They had to go into the Black community and understand how hatred impacted them. They learned that way. It was an amazing kind of work that they were doing. We don't have those anymore. As of about 2007, those cities, Toronto, Ottawa, London, Vancouver, Winnipeg, that all used to have dedicated hate crime units within their police services, all gone. We need that
but
brought
have
back.
they not? But it seems like, again, I just want to speak to these recommendations that they claim to have come up with 30 recommendations.
Yeah, and by the way, Jacqueline, forgive me for interrupting, but one of the recommendations actually came from us, and one of them is, let's bring back dedicated hate crime units. let's have regulations for online hatred. Right now, the big ones, Facebook and Twitter, people use that to promote hatred, and they do very little to nothing about it. If they're not going to be good corporate citizens, if the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world that own Facebook and the others that own Twitter are not going to self-regulate, then it's up to the government to regulate. This is one of the recommendations that we have made. And we're not just saying, a few $1,000s fine. If they can't get rid of the anti-black hatred, of the anti-Semitic hatred, they will be fined millions and millions of dollars.
Well, what do you have to say to those who say that you're infringing upon their right to free speech? What do you have to say to those individuals?
I'll tell you quite simply. We have a balance in this country. This is the great thing about Canada. We had this balance between free speech and hate speech. Hate speech is not free speech. Hate speech is actually harmful speech. And so we have created law in this country that makes it a criminally indictable offense to knowingly and willfully promote hatred against an identifiable group identified by race, creed, color, nationality, and sexual orientation. We're not the only ones. Virtually every Western democracy have similar laws. Guess which country is the only one not to have anti-hate laws?
United States?
United States of America. And look what happened in the United States of America only 3 weeks ago.
Wow.
So the laws are there as a fence of protection, for sure. It's a balance between our inalienable rights to free speech, but also people do not have the right to point at me and say, you're a dirty Jew, or point at Nigel, or point at you, Jacqueline, because of the color of your skin. That's not a right that we have in this country, and we have criminalized people who do that.
Thank you so much. So talk to me about Proud Boys, because in talking to, Proud Boys is one of many organizations. My understanding is that there are approximately 130 active far-right extremist groups across Canada, according to Barbara Perry, who is a professor and expert on hate crimes.
And a former advisor on our board, yes.
Right. And there has been a 30% increase since 2015.
Correct.
I think we remember what happened 2015, 2016. Here comes Donald Trump, right?
Yep,
So there's been a 30% increase since then. And there's 130 active hate groups. But before we even get into the 130, let's talk about Proud Boys. So what is this I'm hearing about Proud Boys, where the founder of Proud Boys, I've been told, is actually a Canadian? Is that correct?
Yes. Gavin McInnes is the founder of Proud Boys. Sadly, he is a Canadian. Proud Boys are a bunch, as Nigel quite rightly noted, a bunch of bigots and thugs. But they're not terribly coordinated here in Canada. As a matter of fact, the most extreme element of the Proud Boys in Canada broke off from them, and they call themselves Proud Boys Canada First. And so Nigel is quite right. We have to be very careful about who we apply the terrorism label to. There are other groups, very, very dangerous groups that we have already pre-identified that should be labeled as terrorist organizations. They are Atomwaffen, which is a violent neo-Nazi group. They are the Base, and O9A, which is a Nazi death cult that was actually, we believe, involved in the murder in September of a Muslim gentleman in front of his mosque in Rexdale. The police are still investigating whether or not that was a hate crime. We have insisted, from the information we were able to gather online, that this man belonged to this Nazi death cult, and that's why he committed the murder against this Muslim gentleman.
Wow.
So these are three groups that we know of that absolutely should be on the list.
Wow. So,
So you remember what happened up in Rexdale? Like I'm a school teacher. I grew up in Rexdale. My dad still lives there, right? So he was just sitting in front of his mosque, right, making sure that people were going inside and out, his place of worship, and he's like, I think he was like 60 years old, something
60
along
years
that.
old. He was 60 years old, yes. Minding his own business.
Minding his own business. And he lost his life in a violent, horrible, horrific way in front of his family and his friends. Right? So it's not some far off academic thought process that we're having here. This war is here on our laps, and we can no longer, we must take our blinders off on this. We cannot, and I'm sorry, like maybe I just don't allow for the excuse this for people to be gullible to say, oh well, this is really about anti-maskers, or this is about I want more oil. Like, this is about hatred of people because of them either being Jewish, because they're black, because of who they love, because of their religion. That's what this war is about right now.
Well, that's a strong word, war, and if that's where where we've come to in our fight against racism, then so it be. But let me share some additional information with you. So my understanding, and correct me where I'm wrong, okay, guys, most of these groups are organized around ideologies against certain religions and races, with anti-Muslim and anti-Jewish sentiments being the most common. So here we are, people of color, people like you and I, Nigel, who, most of us run around thinking we're the most hated group ever, right? We're the most persecuted people ever. When I don't know, according to my understanding, is that the ideologies actually are mainly centered around Muslim and anti-Jewish sentiments being the most common, followed by hatred for immigrants of any kind, and indigenous people, women, LGBT communities, and other minority groups. So where do we fit in? Where do black people fit in? I just want to know exactly where we fit in, because there's a good number, when I say us, I mean black people, people of color, that think that we're the most hated. What's the truth on that?
Well, look, I mean, there's an economic. Okay, I know that I didn't mean to make your members feel people when I use the war analogy. That's just how I'm seeing it. I don't mean to offend folks.
But that's okay. Just in the same way that there was a war on crime and there's a war on drugs, there can be a war on hate. That's okay.
Yeah.
Continue.
So for me, there's no doubt that when you look at housing, when you look at work, decent work, when we look at economic outcomes, that the black community, that indigenous community are at the bottom of all of those lists. There's no, I think that's disputable. I think what we're seeing here, there has definitely been a significant increase in the attacks on our Jewish community here in Toronto, here in Montreal. There's so many different examples of the attacks. We've seen the lives that have been lost from both our Jewish community and our Muslim communities from violent attacks. So I don't, for me, it's an intersectional approach. And for me, again, as I said, bring us back to the quote, from Martin Luther King: "An injury to one is an injury to all." I think, we have to be fighting this together, right? We, even though I do recognize personally that, the Jewish community has seen the most significant increase in regards to the violent attacks against their community and against their culture, all parts of their community, along with our Muslim community.
I'm gonna support that. Bernie, sounds like you want to add to something to that.
I just wanted people not to get too restful on the issue of whether or not the black community is under attack. The black community is always under a microscope by racists, whether it's in housing, whether it's having to do with economics. Where you find an anti-black racist, you will inevitably always find an anti-Semite. Where you find an anti-Semite, you will inevitably probably always find an anti-black racist or an Islamophobe or a homophobe. They're all woven into the same fabric. And so when we talk about the need to come together intersectionally, as Nigel so beautifully put it, this is the only way to fight this war. This is a very strange war. We're fighting a war against hatred, and the way to fight a war against hatred is twofold. You have to confront it, and you have to love those that you're fighting with. And we have so much work to do just to bring the black and white populations together, Jews and Muslims together, indigenous people and Canadians together. Once we're able to have people walk down similar roads and have similar ideals, then we are better able to, that's our armor. That's our armor against hatred.
Thank you. You know, and just to add to that before I move on to my next question, I support what you gentlemen have said 110%. And just to speak a little bit more to the rise in criminal incidents, I totally get what you're saying, Nigel, about the Jewish community being, a group that has been constantly attacked, in some way, shape, or form, hate-related shape or form. It just so happens, this is my personal opinion, that people of color are just more vocal about it. And why am I saying that? Because statistics also show that 80 to 85% of hate crimes go unreported. 80 to 85%. So only 15% get reported. And that 15%, we kind of, a lot of the times we see people of color being the ones that say, hey, I was discriminated against, or I was pulled over, or I was arrested without cause, or I was treated in a certain fashion. But if realistically, the 80 to 85%, which go unreported, started reporting, we would see a much more broader representation of exactly what communities are being affected more so than others. But to speak to Bernie's response, which is where you find an anti-Semite, you will likely find a person who also hates people of color as well. 100% I agree with that. 100% I agree. I don't think that it's possible to hate people of color and like indigenous people and like Jewish people. I think that your hatred is across the board. And this is why I when I do speak on this subject, I always like to reference this topic or reference this statement is when black lives improve, all lives improve. So because what is happening to that black person, the trickle-down effect is the Jewish person and the indigenous person and the immigrants and vice versa, right? So that's what I believe wholeheartedly. But statistically, just to bring some evidence or share some evidence, there has been an increase in violent crime by 38%. And that includes assault, uttering threats, criminal harassment, and more, according to Perry. And most of the crimes documented by police are by individuals who are not currently part of a specific hate group, which suggests that it is much more pervasive than you think. Can you speak to that at all?
Go ahead, Nigel.
Well, I mean, mine is just more of like from personally, again, examples that I'm acutely aware of. I mean, we're talking when you're dealing with hatred, they're equal opportunity hate because they're even looking at women and not, we're leaving that whole piece out too, and the misogynist that goes along with it also. But what we're seeing, our public servants that are attacked on a daily basis. I know personally school teachers that are receiving hateful messages at their place of work. I know a school principal in Toronto District School Board in High Park right now that has been that continues to be verbally attacked by folks in the community. So it is pervasive in our society. We're not. This is not a overblowing it. I think January 6th is a perfect example of if we don't do something to reverse this, it will. That's where we are going.
Okay.
And
And
I
can
know we're running a little short of time, so I
Yes.
just want to say two things. We have moved from hateful words of the past to hateful actions of the future and the present and the future. So right now we have seen hatred full bore. We've seen words scrawled on walls. That's moved to actual assaults and murders. That's where we're at today. And by the way, for your listeners, on Monday, keep your eyes and ears open. There will be a poll that's being released by the Canadian Race Relations Foundation that I think will stun a lot of people in terms of the real numbers out there, as well as what how Canadians are feeling about hatred in society. It's something to keep an eye out for, and you're hearing it first on this show.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that breaking news.
There you
Okay,
go.
and I saw your cute one pop in there on you, Nigel. Aw, that was so awesome.
We're all
so
working from home, right?
Yes, we
I
are.
know. So I'm gonna ask one question in two parts to wrap up the show. Two parts. Okay, how does an individual know when they've joined a hate group? And what can we, as members of the community, do in our simplest way to try to combat the growing interest in hate crimes / groups in Canada?
So let me do part one, and Nige, if you're comfortable, then you can do part two. Part one is actually very simple. People with hate in their hearts actually look for this. So when they go online, because that is the place where it's most prevalent, that is where most individuals become radicalized towards hatred. People who don't hate will not be radicalized into hatred. People who already have hate in their hearts, and they could have learned it at home, they could have learned it amongst their friends, they could have learned it in their readings, but they're ready, they're looking for something, and they find it online, and that's why we have to do what we can to train teachers, police, and others how to recognize the signs of radicalization going forward. Nigel, I'll leave you to part two.
Yeah, no, I think that, well, no, I think Bernie, you really hit the nail on the head, which is about education for sure, and that's one of the as a school teacher and as part of the network, why I'm so proud of the work that we're doing in developing these resources that can be used in in public services and in different businesses or organizations to try to identify folks that are doing this, that are being drawn into it. I mean, from a purely, for those of your listeners who are like, oh yeah, I'm ready to do something right now. I mean, it will just call your MPP and your MP and ask and tell them that our police services should be held accountable to lay charges to the most egregious examples, that they can just look at our website and see what we're reporting on, lay those charges, bring those people in. But I definitely think there's that advocacy piece. As a parent, we know that hate is taught. When a child is born, child is not, they are molded by their family and their community around them. So we know that we recognize, we have to be talking with our neighbors. We have to be continuing love. I know how corny this is going to sound, but love does conquer hate, and I do believe that we need to continue to reach out to our neighbors, to our the community, and continue to talk about the kind of world we want, 50 years from now, 10 years from now, and start working that together. That's at the heart of where I'm coming from. But I know that we can do this. We have to for our children. You saw my 5-year-old, so he's my heart.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for that. And I would also urge my listeners and viewers to visit your website. It's very, very impressive. It gives some wonderful case studies and scenarios of situations that your organization have found yourself involved with and have come out with some great results. It talks about the fact that you've hunted down and identified a number of hate group nucleuses right here in Canada, and you've brought to justice a few of them as well, and so that they can face, the criminal proceedings that are attached with being involved in a hate group or acting on hate related violence. And so I'm very, very happy about what your organization has done. And now that I've become aware of it, I'm too happy to share it with others. Every time I talk about this, I will be sharing of your news and your information and your website with them. But I did notice something else when I went to your website, and it is mentioning the fact that you do require resources in order to keep yourself going and keep doing the good work that you do. And I want to implore that anybody watching this show, whether you're watching it live or watching it on the demand, to please visit this website and contribute with a donation of whatever kind you can to help keeping Nigel going and keeping the chairman of the board going on the projects that they have. I personally will be making a donation this week, and I encourage others to do the same. Okay.
Antihate.ca. Thank you so much, Jacqueline.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of the weekend. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll see you again soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Ghana up. GBKM TV, the station with a vision. GBKM TV, the station with a difference now. Slim Flex said so. Big up Ghana up.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're listening from in the world. My name is Jacqueline Dixon, and you're tuned in to the Ordinary People Show. Ordinary people can do extraordinary things. And we're broadcasting live on GBKM FM TV network from Toronto, Canada. I'm extremely excited to be in studio this week. Why? Because I missed you guys dearly last week. For my avid listeners and followers, you know that I was not in studio last week because I had to play it safe. Had to make sure that I was well. I was feeling just a little bit off. And what do you do when you feel off? Ladies and gentlemen, you stay home. Stay home and make sure that it's just either a passing thing or you get whatever necessary treatment that you might need to get for whatever ailment might be taking over your body. And I just want to make sure that I'm always doing the right thing when it comes to health matters, especially in a very delicate time like this. As you know, we're all experiencing a pandemic and we're all experiencing it together, and we all need to do our part in a very serious way to ensure that we help to reduce the spread of COVID-19 and any other variants that might be spreading around our community. So do your part. Ladies and gentlemen, again, thank you so much for tuning into the Ordinary People Show today. I've got an exciting show for you. Listen, I might have been away physically away, but spiritually I'm never away from my listeners and viewers, and never really away from the GBKM studio and the news that we always aspire to share with you on a daily and weekly basis. GBKM FM is proud to let you know that we have launched or expanded our network, of course. We have a brand new website that I'm so excited about. For those of you who are listening to us on our web radio, which is www.gbkm.fm, hello to you. For those of us who are following us on our Facebook, which is Great Benin Kingdom, thank you so much for watching and tuning in today. And for those of you who've made it over to our brand new platform, which is gbkm.tv, 24-hour live television and radio, servicing all of your needs for music, and also pumping out the best in R&B, soca, reggae, calypso, Afro beats, and so much more. When we're not filling the airways with those beautiful melodies, we have a number of live programs that you can enjoy throughout the course of the week. So check it out. Check out our new website when you get there. Don't forget to download the app.